This week on Conundrums, our guest is Stephen Bassett, director of the Paradigm Research Group, who's working diligently on UFO disclosure. We'll talk with Stephen next on Conundrums. We're talking with Stephen Bassett, the director of the Paradigm Research Group and an advocate for the doing away with the 65-year embargo on extraterrestrial knowledge in the United States. Stephen, how you doing today?
I'm doing just fine.
It's been a while since we've talked to you, really almost a year. So tell me, what's been going on in the past year with your efforts for disclosure?
There's been quite a few things. I like the fact that you use the term embargo. This is the Truth Embargo is a phrase I introduced back in the late 90s to replace what had typically been called UFO cover-up.
Right.
Because UFO cover-up, in my opinion, first of all, it had UFO in it, which I didn't like, and secondly, it's not accurate. It doesn't really reflect what happened, which was that the government, for national security reasons, made a decision. It was not a casual decision to embargo any formal acknowledgement of what they were seeing and knew about, vehicles they had, bodies of ETs they had, which is to say they knew there was an ET presence, but they could not allow that to be a public accepted reality. It wasn't easy, this embargo. It required a lot of effort, a lot of money, but they were generally successful in keeping this contained. So since the end of the Cold War, a movement has grown up that the Cold War's over, the Soviets have disbanded, Soviet Empire disbanded, they've all become capitalists, and now it's time for us to know the truth, that we're not alone in the universe, which is a pretty big piece of information to withhold from a species. And so that is what we've been developing an international movement to achieve, and that is disclosure, the formal acknowledgement of the ET presence.
You mentioned earlier you don't like the term UFO. Why don't you like that term?
Well, first of all, it's an oxymoron. Unidentified flying object. You study unidentified flying objects in order to, quote, identify them. And over the years, the more we learned, it didn't change. It was still unidentified flying object. The analogy I would use is if for some reason the whole area of particle physics, which is a very profound and deep area of physics, science, had decided that they would call that research unidentified small particles. And that's what you would refer to no matter what. What do you do? Well, I study unidentified small particles. Do you ever identify them? Well, yeah. Well, then why don't you call them identified? Well, we're not allowed to do that. UFO became an acronym that was at the center of the Truth Embargo's ridicule and ghettoization process. Ghettoize the term UFO, apply it to anything and everything that you want to minimize, marginalize, and off we go. Plus, it's just not true. It's one thing to call a light in the sky that's moving somewhat oddly off in the distance, an unidentified flying object, and certainly those happen. It's another thing to call a 30, 40-foot silver disc parked off the wingtip of a commercial or military plane and seen by the pilots and reported as such, calling that an unidentified flying object. Well, actually, it's an identified object. It's a craft. It is metallic. It is antigravitic. And if it was seen back in the 40s, it was almost certainly non-human. So the whole idea of unidentified flying object becomes a tool of the Truth Embargo. And while the phrase is going to be around for a while, ufology is still the standard term to refer to the science of the phenomena. It's not a term that serves well in trying to resolve the political impasse.
Right. And you place a 65-year imposed truth embargo Do you think the phenomenon actually goes back further than that? Why did you say 65 years?
I'm referring to the modern era. The phenomena almost certainly goes back as far as we can go back in history. And there, some very hard work was done to re-examine all of ancient history, ancient documents, religious lore, mythological lore, and so forth. And the groundbreakers there were von Daniken and Sitchin and others, but others have now stepped in. And as we are learning from Ancient Aliens, this excellent series on History Channel, when you actually take the blinders off, open your mind and say, look, is it possible there's extraterrestrial content and references in our ancient history? You find it all over the place. That's not to say that there aren't some of the threads and stories on Ancient Aliens with false. I'm sure some of them will be. But they're doing the best they can to bring out the concept. And but as far as we're concerned right now, while it's interesting to learn a little bit more about what happened, say, 1,000 or 2,000 years ago, it's what's happened since 1947 that's really of most importance to us as a civilization, as a species. And I'm referring, of course, to the explosion of this issue into the public consciousness with the mass sightings that occurred in early 1947, the most famous of which being the Kenneth Arnold sighting in Mount Rainier, and then the crash of a vehicle at Roswell, New Mexico, the recovery of that vehicle, the technology in it, and bodies, at least dead bodies and possibly even a living body. And there have been other crashes. So from that point forward, we are in the modern era. And the modern era of the UFO, I believe we can sort of run from 47 to 91. And then since 91, we have been in the era of exopolitics, which is the era of the political resolution of this issue.
As exopolitics, what are your goals for the Paradigm Research Group? What are you wanting to accomplish?
Paradigm Research Group was created for one reason only. This was in 1996, and that is to resolve this issue, the extraterrestrial phenomena issue, politically. Now, by resolve doesn't mean to get every question answered and come to understand everything that's going on, but rather to bridge the primary barrier to having this issue properly engaged by our society, by our institutions, and that is the Truth Embargo. So it is pursued every means possible to advocate for ending that Truth Embargo, what some have called the UFO cover-up. And that ending, which we now define as disclosure, we carefully defined it. Disclosure, capital D. It's an event. It's not a process. It is the formal acknowledgement by world governments of the extraterrestrial presence. Probably starting with a single government, probably the United States, soon to be followed by other nations. After which, of course, the human race, in very short order, because obviously communications are global and almost instantaneous now, will know within a few days, virtually the entire human race, that it's not alone in the universe, that there are other civilizations, and some of the civilizations are engaging us. That's disclosure. That is the goal of PRG. Everything else is secondary to that.
You said it's not a process, it's an event. Are you looking for one major announcement, or are you hoping to just get a little bit out as it goes along? You're wanting to
getting it out as it goes along. That's the process. That's small d disclosure, right? Disclosure with a small d. Capital D is the formal acknowledgement of the extraterrestrial presence by world governments. We can imagine how that acknowledgement will take place. They're just not going to send out an email. Right. This is a big deal. It will be an announcement. It will be carefully crafted. It will be a significant event. It will be, in fact, the most profound event in human history. The very first nation that breaks it open, that's kind of the moment of disclosure. That will be disclosure day from that point forward. It may take a few days for other nations to get on board, but the nation that goes first will forever be connected to that event on that day, and will achieve a substantial amount of historical legacy and, I think, political clout in the moment.
How would a government go about doing that? Just make a simple announcement and that's it? Or how do you think that would go down? How do you think that would happen?
Obviously, there are at least a dozen governments that could disclose that are clearly in play. But let me just confine myself to the United States.
Sure.
What has to happen is well, let me first preface this. The effect of the Truth Embargo for the last 65 years is literally to build a prison around the government. In other words, the government is virtually trapped in a prison of its own making, or a prison cell of its own making. Now, what do I mean? Over time, the whole massive classified world, particularly the deep black world with unacknowledged special access programs and a whole plethora of other stuff, has just separated away from the political oversight. And Americans are naive if they think that this vast world of advanced research, of secret programs and so forth, that is even hidden behind black generalized budget entries, some of which there are no entries, that somehow this is being properly oversaw by the president or the Congress. They're naive. It's not happening. And so it's literally separated away. Now, that doesn't mean that it's a rogue state. It doesn't mean that it's evil. It just means that the nature of those 60 years, since 65 years, particularly the Cold War, resulted in the creation of this vast secret empire.
Are you talking about something like a government within a government?
Not quite. No, it is a separate entity that is split off in a way from proper oversight. It's still, there are plenty of people in government that know kind of where it is or where the agencies operate. But the black world, the secret world, the deep secret world of the military intelligence complex is simply not under the oversight anymore of the president or the Congress. If you're a member of Congress or a member of the select committees on intelligence in the House or Senate, or even a member of the presidential staff, and you want to go see dead bodies of ETs or research facilities doing reverse engineering, forget about it. You're not going to get there. You're not going to get in. And a number of presidents have tried to get direct information on this and have basically been told you can't have it. I'm talking about Clinton. I'm talking about Jimmy Carter, right? Mm-hmm. And perhaps, most likely Kennedy. Other presidents may have had a little more access. All of this is not good. So here's the problem. Here's the prison cell they built. Sure. Since the president and the executive branch can't get access to the important information that they need to properly disclose this ET presence and back it up with an appropriate amount of evidence, it's stuck. It can't really walk out on that ledge. Or on that plank, as it were. Right. Or go out on that limb because it hasn't got the military intelligence community backing it up. Mm-hmm. And so they're pinned down. Meanwhile, while the executive branch of government does not control the other two branches, the Congress and the judiciary, mm-hmm. The president is the commander-in-chief of the military and also the intelligence agencies serve the White House. And so consequently, all of those people that work within the intelligence community, no matter how deep black the programs, no matter how little oversight there is, they in fact are in a chain of command of which the president is the commander-in-chief. And so they can't unilaterally come out and disclose the ET presence. Mm-hmm. Some general or bird colonel can't walk out in front of the cameras and say, look, I think it's time the American people knew about the ET presence. We haven't talked to the president about this, but you understand. Mm-hmm. So they can't operate. And so that's the prison cell that they've created. Right. And so the way disclosure has to happen, particularly in the U.S., is that enough pressure has got to be put on the government in general, particularly from the media, once they really get into this issue at the level of the White House and secretary and cabinet level, with questions regarding the evidence, which is masked all around them. That kind of pressure is going to ultimately force someone within the executive branch to meet with someone in the military intelligence branch, private meeting, to work out the basic details about what is needed by the executive, what the military intelligence, national security people expect from the president as part of this process. Mm-hmm. They'll reach an understanding and then the president will go forward. There'll be a press conference probably set up. The president may not actually make the formal announcement. That may be left to the press conference and other individuals, which could include someone who would be moderating that press conference, or the president could make the announcement directly from the Oval Office, then followed by the press conference. But it'll be something along those lines. As I've said many times, if I'm the government, under standard procedures, you would hold it late on a Friday after the news cycle, but late enough that people have gotten home, even on the East Coast, on the West Coast rather. So you're talking in that 7:30, 8 o'clock range, maybe even 8:30, 9. And you would make that announcement. Mm-hmm. That would give people the whole weekend to absorb it, for the press to sort of get their bearings, and then revisit it on the following Monday, hopefully without having to close any banks or do anything draconian like that. That's how you might expect it. So if you wake up one morning and kind of learn that there's a presidential announcement coming on a Friday evening, mm-hmm. and it's a little mystery surrounding it, and they haven't really said what it's going to be about, you may want to definitely be watching television at night.
Right, absolutely. And of course, many people say that, well, if you were to announce something like this, it would destroy the world. Religions would fall apart. The government would fall apart. Do you think that would happen?
No, not at all.
Why not?
It wasn't even the case in probably the 1940s, though. Mm-hmm. It would have been a little more of a tough pill to swallow. Mm-hmm. The reason for initiating and maintaining the Truth Embargo wasn't because religion or finance or civilization would fall apart, because we'd all go crazy and run down the street naked. Mm-hmm. It was because they were facing the prospect of a third world war that would be nuclear.
Right.
And they didn't know where that was going to go. They didn't know what Stalin was going to do. Plus, they had ET. They had ET tech. What does that mean? Why are these entities here? There was a huge amount they simply didn't know. Mm-hmm. And they just did not want that out until they knew more. And as they learned more, the Cold War deepened and got really, really bad. At some point, as you know, we had almost 70,000 nuclear weapons in stockpile, with thousands of them pointed between 4 or 5 nations for both land-based and submarine-based missiles. And had they been launched, and they almost were, would have created a global firestorm and nuclear winter that would have destroyed most of civilization. So they've had a real serious situation, which Americans got used to and took for granted, which is not wise. They shouldn't take that for granted. And they had to make the decision about the ET issue in that context. So, but as part of the Truth Embargo, it served the government to kind of push out propaganda and facilitate and encourage propaganda about this would upset everything and destroy civilization and religion. It's nonsense, it's not true, and it's not going to happen.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So you said putting pressure on various agencies to try to bring this out. How do you, as an advocate, how do you go about putting pressure on these agencies?
It's a chess game. Mm-hmm. You have your pieces, the government has its pieces, and you maneuver your pieces as best you can to try to put pressure on the government side of the board. I mean, that's really what it is. There's many pieces. It's very complex, lots of moves. All manner of things have been done. The fundamental pressure comes from the basic research, which has been amassing for 65 years and is now huge. Mm-hmm. Alan Hynek had a wonderful phrase when he was asked, "Where's the evidence, Dr. Hynek?" And he would say, "Well, where do you want me to back up the truck?" Mm-hmm. So that's key pressure. Second area of pressure is witnesses are starting to come forward. There had always been some people in government that had come out and spoken and said things, but it was limited prior to the end of the Cold War. But after the Cold War ended, the number of people willing to take either some risk or maybe didn't have a risk legally, but were willing to speak forward, come out of the closet, grew. And so we've had scores of military and agency witnesses come forward with a range of testimony, which simply confirms the evidence that had been amassed regarding ET presence. So these witnesses, including officers in the military and astronauts, I can assure you that's putting pressure on the government. Mm-hmm. Another major source of pressure is that the willingness to go along with the sort of unstated leadership of the U.S. government on this issue has dramatically diminished since the end of the Cold War. Mm-hmm. A lot of things have diminished for America in the last 20 to 25, 30 years. And so a number of countries are clearly showing that they're not prepared to stand with this embargo much longer. A good 11 or 12 of them have released tens of thousands of UFO files. into the public domain, tens of thousands of them, pages that have been downloaded millions of times. This started back in 2004. It's been going on for 8 years. You've got witnesses coming forward, and other governments, particularly in South America, a number of countries down there, are actually cooperating with the issue. And so America started to be isolated on this. And more importantly, there are two countries that definitely could take this move for their own very national interests, and that is the People's Republic of China and Russia. So the U.S. government is now faced with a rather very awkward possibility that the major component of the former Soviet Union, a totalitarian propaganda-based state, or the current People's Republic of China, which is still a communist country and an ideological control state, may be the country that brings the great truth, one of the great pieces of information and momentous transition changes in history to the world's attention, not the United States. And I've got to believe that is causing some people inside the military intelligence community, maybe even in the executive branch, to lose some sleep.
As you're progressing along with exopolitics, what factors do you consider the most resistance you come up against?
The Congress, probably the most resistant, utter block of cement, which I saw that way back in the mid-'90s, which is why, while I'm still a registered lobbyist, I really, after a while, I stopped any efforts to kind of go at Congress. It was a waste of time. It was like bouncing a golf ball off a cement wall. Resistance there is huge. The resistance in the academic community is profound. This issue is 65 years old. There's a huge amount of evidence. The academic community consists of millions of professors. I'm serious, millions of professors over the last 60 years, 5,000 colleges and universities, and the entire academic world, with a couple of modest, minor exceptions, has completely stood down on the issue and gone along with the Truth Embargo. Easily the greatest intellectual failure in all of human history, recorded history. The media is the third resistant area, but they are getting better. I mean, they are coming around because their job, their whole raison d'etre is to get news, to break great stories, win Pulitzer Prizes. And so in a sense, engaging this issue is exactly what they're supposed to be doing. So while they went along with the Truth Embargo en masse from the late 40s through the 80s, after the Cold War, they started to loosen up. And now we're getting a lot more coverage. In fact, I believe there's some media ready to jump big into this. They just need the right angle, and that's part of my job, is to provide them the right angle, the right platform for them to stand on, and then start asking some questions, which I assure you the government does not want to be asked. And if are asked those questions, has no real course of action but to tell the truth. And that, of course, would end the Truth Embargo pretty quickly.
There you go. You travel the world, going to different countries with the exopolitics theme. Do you find these same issues in other countries?
In general, the Truth Embargo is not nearly as entrenched outside the U.S. The U.S. is where it was primarily concentrated. I'm not saying that other countries didn't go along with it. I'm not saying they didn't take some measures. But overall, the United States sort of knew that if they can keep the United States press and the Congress out of this, if they keep universities here out of this, if they can keep all the money out of it, no funding, no grants, no philanthropists, no granting institutions, that would be a lot. So when you go out of the country, there's less of a stigma. Young people are more engaged in the issue, particularly in the English language world. In fact, in the Asian world, Japan is quite interested in the issue. China actually studies this phenomenon governmentally and does not suppress UFO organizations or research. So right now, essentially, the U.S. is kind of the last nation standing in a way. It's got its arms crossed, it's got its teeth clenched, and it's saying, we just can't do this yet. We just can't do this yet. And it's not a very attractive posture.
Do you approach other countries with the idea that maybe they would get the jump on this to force the U.S.? Do you think the U.S. is the stumbling block?
I speak publicly all the time and mention the fact that any of a number of other countries could do this, so I'm definitely putting that bug in their ear. And Exopolitics is around the world, and the Exopolitics World Network, which PRG founded back in, I can't remember, 2005, I forget. We've got 28 countries now with portal websites, and there's activists in all those countries. Conferences are being created, websites are being generated, YouTube videos. There have been some people in other countries that have approached government in various ways, including the European Union. So it's getting out there. I mean, but by and large, these countries don't need to be reminded of that. They know that. I mean, they know full well. Russia, China, Britain, Australia, Canada, France, Brazil, Germany, even Sweden.
Right.
Any one of those countries could probably end the truth embargo tomorrow, because if the legitimate government of those countries come forward to their people and say, yes, we know there's an ET presence. We have film of them on our gun cameras from chase planes. Here's a little more evidence. We couldn't tell you before, we tell you now. That's it. It's over. So they don't need to be reminded. However, I'm happy to do so, and I do mention this. More for the U.S. government. I want the U.S. government to be constantly reminded that we no longer control the world anymore. We never really did. And in fact, because of dysfunctional policies and dysfunctional government, our grip on, quote, how would you say, other nations' policies has been diminished year by year. And so I'm happy to remind them constantly that the greatest event in human history is at your disposal, but you may lose that opportunity.
Right.
And then you'll have to answer to history and answer to your own people about that.
You know, recently in the news over the past year or so, we've seen social media play a huge part in, like, Egypt and other countries where uprisings are occurring. Are you using social media to get the word out, and how do you do that?
Sure. PRG has 6 Facebook pages. It belongs to 200 groups that are interested in the UFO ET issue, extraterrestrial issue, exopolitics. Post all the time. He's got a Twitter account. So yeah, happy to use the social media. And we're seeing increasingly that social media is gaining power every single day, particularly the YouTube component of it.
Are you working with or creating a grassroots movement to keep momentum going, to keep push this along?
We do the best we can, but I understand there's virtually no funding for this activism.
All right.
You cannot get funding for it. There are thousands and thousands of people in this country that I think know about the ET issue, know it's true, have substantial funds, but the truth embargo has them sufficiently cowed that they are just unable to step in. They're afraid that they might suffer embarrassment or whatever, and so the money's just not there.
Right.
If we had even $1 million, we could probably increase the grassroots element of this 100-fold very quickly. But we had already a fraction of that.
Do you think you could ever reach a point where it'd be almost like the Occupy movement, where there would be people organizing in cities to try to force the government to come clean with the information that they have?
I doubt it. This is not an issue that lends itself to the street. Lends itself to that kind of activism. That kind of activism will probably take place post-disclosure, once the cat's out of the bag, as people start to struggle and work towards getting the truth and nothing but the truth from the government about this huge issue, phenomenon in history. And you may see it, but not before. This is a movement that is going to be conducted in cyberspace, and possibly, and with the engagement of the media. And the media will probably be the key that opens the door. They'll probably be the determining factor ultimately, unless a nation, any one of our dozen nations proactively simply moves forward. But assuming that none of the dozen nations moves forward anytime soon, then what's going to happen is the media in one of those nations is going to finally decide this is the biggest news story in history. And I don't care what the consensus, I forget the consensus. I don't care what the prevailing protocols are. I'm asking the secretary of this and the secretary of that and the deputy prime minister about this, that, and other evidence. And if I get a stupid answer, I'm going to, follow up. And then my colleagues are going to step behind me and say, wait a minute, you didn't answer that question. When the day that happens, the truth embargo is probably now numbered in hours or weeks, maximum weeks.
Right.
The press can end this at almost any time. And nothing short of rounding all the media up and putting them in a gulag somewhere could stop that.
You mentioned not having very much funding. How is the PRG funded? How do you keep this thing going?
Okay, good question. I spent $250,000 of my money over the first 8 years. Since then, I ran out, and PRG has been funded by modest donations from around the country, some out of the country, and I'm supported by some Social Security. That's the funding for PRG right now. It has been for a number of years. It was getting better back around 2009, 2008, but the financial collapse gutted that. In other words, the trend was definitely moving up, and that was nice, but that trend was completely truncated by the financial collapse. But fortunately, the internet is in a sense free, and the power of the net is huge. So if it wasn't for the internet, no, we wouldn't have a chance, which is another reason why disclosure was not going to happen prior to 1991. It just wasn't going to happen. The internet and the end of the Cold War has made it possible. The U.S. government, I don't think, saw that quickly enough. I think they overreacted with some very bad behavior between 96 and 99, but that kind of stopped at the end of 99, 2000. And I think now the government is kind of resigned to the fact that disclosure is inevitable. Unfortunately, there are things that could cause a problem. Great progress is being made, but 911, September 11, 2001, really set the disclosure process back without question.
Right.
And there's a number of things that could happen tomorrow that could set it back. And so disclosure is inevitable and soon, unless something really bad happens, in which case it'll be put aside for a while. It'll be much more difficult to pursue. But then we'll be dealing with some god-awful chain reaction of events in response to any number of things. I could list them, but I don't want to depress everybody. But I think most everybody sort of knows that we're standing on the precipice here, and there's just a whole bunch of really awful things that can happen if we don't get our act together.
Right.
And I would contend that telling the truth about the world to the people, governments getting in the truth business, particularly on this massive issue, would be a huge step towards stepping back from the precipice and starting to get some things accomplished, building trust in government, and altering our worldview about really how do we want to handle our affairs.
Right.
Do we really want to destroy the planet? Do we really want to go to war every time we have a dispute? And 1,000 other things. So I believe disclosure is critical to this century turning out well. Others may disagree, but what can I say? That is one of the reasons why there is this movement. The people in it believe that disclosure is absolutely critical to the 21st century being possibly the transformative century in recorded history, leading to extraordinary outcomes, or the worst century in human history, surpassing even the 20th for its awfulness.
So if someone wanted to fund the organization or to help support the organization, how are ways that they could do that?
ParadigmResearchGroup.org has a contribution page where all the information they need is there about how to contribute and the nature of the organization. And so they just go to ParadigmResearchGroup.org, find the contribution page, and also review the whole site. I mean, it's a huge site there, and if they want to contribute, get in touch. We'll be happy to hear from them. But right now, the most important thing we need from people is to participate in the current project that PRG is most focused on, and that, of course, is the Disclosure Petition Project.
Right, the Rockefeller Initiative.
Yeah, we the White House started a petition process on the White House website in September of last year. We submitted a disclosure petition the first day. We got the necessary signatures to get a formal response from the White House. That came on November the 4th. All of this, by the way, can easily be viewed at disclosurepetition.info. Right. Disclosurepetition.info. That petition generated the response on November the 4th, which was the first time in record that the White House, the executive branch of the U.S. government, has ever put their position on this issue in writing. And interestingly enough, the position that they put was the hard line, 9 paragraphs that said, There is no evidence at all for an ET presence. There is no evidence for life outside the planet, period. And there is no evidence that that the government has been hiding anything about this issue. A remarkable formal statement, completely false, virtually indefensible, and a huge gift to the disclosure movement. Because now that we have that formal position, and they can't run from it, they obviously can't walk away from it, we'll break it. We're going to break that position, and we break that statement, we break the Truth Embargo. So that happened on November the 4th. Now, on February the 23rd, Disclosure Petition 2 was submitted, and it's up on the White House website now. Disclosure Petition 2, the Rockefeller Initiative, where what we've done is brought the Rockefeller Initiative, which was never covered by the press, never been spoken publicly about any of the principles, and we've stuck it right back into under the media's nose, not just anywhere, but on the White House website itself, including links embedded in the petition to the documents obtained from the government by FOIA to confirm it all. And the people that are connected to the ET issue via the Rockefeller Initiative include no less than former President Bill Clinton, now major advisor of the Democratic Party and key to the President Obama's election, his First Lady Hillary Clinton, who ran for president, nearly won, and is now the Secretary of Defense, his Chief of Staff, Leon Panetta, who Obama made the director of the CIA and now is the Secretary of Defense, John Podesta, who was the key advisor and Chief of Staff to Clinton during that period, who went on to found the most powerful progressive think tank in the country, called for the release of UFO files twice, and then was made chair of Obama's transition team and helped select Obama's government. And Albert Gore, who ran for president and almost won, and then went on to win the Nobel Prize and go around the world telling governments and corporations how to conduct their affairs, and is still a major player in the world scene. And Bill Richardson, friend of the Clintons and congressman at the time, who was then picked to be Clinton's Secretary of Energy. Obama tried to make him the Secretary of Commerce, and he ran for president, but remained and ran for president, didn't win, but he remained obviously governor of New Mexico until recently. None of these people have ever spoken publicly about this Rockefeller Initiative, which we have the documents to show it took place for 2.5 years. So if we garnish the now 25,000 signatures that are required, it used to be 5,000, they raised it to 25,000, within the 30 days of submission, which means we have to have those signatures by February 24th, the White House will be forced to respond to this petition, and I can assure you it will not be easy to do so. And more importantly, the media is going to cover this more intensely as we approach 25K. The media covered the first disclosure petition worldwide. We had more coverage of that petition and the White House response than any of the other posted petitions combined. There's been about 400, right? And so this could end the Truth Embargo. But to get the maximum impact from this project, the Disclosure Petition 2, Rockefeller Initiative, we need the 25,000 signatures. And if people don't sign it, then we will have to settle for 30 days of exposure, and then it'll be deleted from the White House website on midnight, March 24th. Now, we've got about 5,700, but we need 19,000 more. So we need people to do three things. We need one, they need to go to the whitehouse.gov website, go to We the People, find the petition and sign it. Or go to disclosurepetition.info, where you can find the direct link right to it, right to the petition, as well as information about the petition, the wording, and all that. We need you to go to, then, the petition at the White House website. And if you've already opened an account with We the People and signed petitions, you can sign it in a few seconds. If you haven't, when you click on the petition, you'll be asked to create an account. Right?
And this account that you're creating...
Send you an email.
This account that you're creating... I'm sorry. We just had a little hiccup in Skype, and I thought you had stopped talking. The account that you're creating that on the whitehouse.gov, right?
That's right.
Yeah, so it's not something you're creating with Paragon Group. You're creating your own account with the government. You're going in and you're signing this petition.
Well, you've got to create the account. They send you an email. You click on a verification link. This is very standard procedure for opening accounts. And then there's a password. Right. You use that password to log in, sign the petition. If you want to change the password to something easy to remember, you can do that. You have it in your profile. So you basically have an account with the White House. They ask you if you want to receive information from the White House about presidents, you can decline that. Millions of people, a couple million people have signed. No one's being harassed.
Right.
And they will publish your first name, but only your last initial on the petition, and the signatures will be up on that site. So far, maybe 15,000 petitions were submitted since September. About 400 or so got the necessary 150 signatures to be posted. Of those, about 75 achieved the required number of signatures to be responded to, which they have to get those in 30 days. So far, there have been 8 responses, and there are 64 open petitions up awaiting signature or a response. There's only 122 petitions in play. One of those is Disclosure Petition 2. So you can see this is a fairly formal process with protocols. It's a serious matter, and the press is paying attention to these responses. And so we need people to go and sign that petition. We need to then spread the direct link as far and wide as possible through their Facebook and MySpace and Twitter accounts and their email lists, their own websites, blogs, whatever, so that they can get 10, 20 more people to sign it.
Absolutely.
And then if they're feeling particularly civic-minded, they can use the feedback section at We the People on the White House website and send a note to the White House saying, I've signed, I think this is important, be respectful, and that we certainly expect the White House to give an appropriate and comprehensive response. It's those three things, but most importantly, we need to sign it.
Right.
And we're running out of time. We've only got 16 days, and we need 19,000 more signatures. Oh, by the way, it's important to note, anybody can sign. You don't have to be in the U.S. or a U.S. citizen. Anybody with an email address and a first and last name and access to a computer can sign any of these petitions that we would people.
Oh, so they are taking signatures from other countries as well.
That's right.
Okay. And once this goes through, what do you expect will happen after you get the number of signatures you need, the 25,000?
Well, the petition will remain up until the White House responds, however long that is. By the way, since the first disclosure petition got a response, the petition has been up at the White House website since September the 22nd, and the petition along with the White House response has been up since November the 4th to be viewed by anybody in the world that goes to the White House site and noses around. So that first petition is getting tremendous exposure, and it's going to remain up probably as long as the We the People project is ongoing. This petition will only remain 30 days if it does not get the 25K by March 2024. But if it gets it, then it will stay up. Then there will be a White House response, and that will stay up. And PRG will continue to significantly promote awareness to the Rockefeller Initiative with the aim that major media are finally going to step in and say, this is a news story we simply cannot ignore it anymore. We can't, if we're true journalists. And so this response, I mean, this 25K barrier is potentially huge, history-making, because if we get it, not only do we get the response, which is going to be very hard for the administration to dance around. I mean, they're really in a tough spot. But they could refuse to respond at all, but that would probably generate even more media pressure. But it also could generate a media storm in which questions are being asked of very powerful people. So history could be made here, but I can't sign for people. PRG cannot sign for people. They've got to go do it. They need to take the 2 or 3 minutes it takes to do this. It won't cost them anything. And I should also note that for whatever reason, the White House We the People site has had a lot of problems. It's been down for maintenance many times. And people are having a lot of trouble signing. Obviously, a couple million have signed, but it's almost like they're trying to make it difficult. It doesn't seem to work with the Chrome browser. It doesn't work particularly well with the Firefox browser. It works best with the Internet Explorer browser. If you've already set up an account and go back in, you can't get in. But we found if you clear your cookies and come back in or change browsers, clear your cookies, you can get in. So it's kind of like, they're saying, well, if you really want the truth about this, if you really want and believe you deserve to know the truth about this, we're not going to make it easy on you. Now, I don't know if that's true. It's a very complex site. It has a lot of activity. But I can assure you that if any of the commercial sites like Amazon or Verizon or any of the other major sites that have people with accounts were operating this way, people would be fired. The whole IT department would probably be under threat of being fired, and there would be a huge problem. So is it just the government's not quite as strong in creating a site like that. I don't know. But all I can say is, people, the truth takes a little effort. And so whatever problems you're having, stick with it until your signature is recorded. And check in at disclosurepetition.info. If we learn anything more about issues with signing, we'll put those up. But 5,800 or 700 people have signed, so we know you can do it. Right? But it's the White House that put the 30-day limit on it.
Right.
And we have to live with that. It is a tough challenge. 25,000 signatures in 30 days, and the vast majority of people in the country don't even know that the We the People project exists.
Right.
Because the White House is not promoting it. They've done very little to promote it. The president has never mentioned it, because the president knows if he did, the number of signatures would probably increase 20-fold. Right. So they want to engage us, and they want to develop this concept, but they want to take their time. Okay, fine. Not much I can do about that. But 25,000 signatures is eminently doable. I've already done 25 radio interviews, including coast to coast. The audience was 2-3 million. I've got 15 more booked. So I think people are learning about it, but are they willing to take a few minutes and go and put their name behind ending this truth embargo, and at least learning that they're not alone in the universe, that there are others, intelligences out there, at least that, all right? As opposed to never knowing that as they live out their lives. I could spend hours giving you the other reasons why we need to have this out and why the truth embargo needs to end. But just on the basis of it's wrong for something this profound to be withheld from people living their lives is more than enough reason for many thousands of people to sign up.
Absolutely. After you get 25,000 signatures, is there an amount of time, a deadline that the government has to respond?
No, they can take all the time they want. I don't think they will. I think they'll respond sometime second half of April, maybe mid-April, the second is when we get this.
Absolutely. Well, we want to encourage everyone to make sure that you go there. It only takes like 3 to 5 minutes to fill this thing out, maybe even less than that. All the links are in our show notes.
If it's working right. You can do it in 2 minutes.
Yeah, and then if
assuming your email is working fast, because they send you an email immediately. If it comes to you quickly, you can hit the verification link, take the password, sign in, sign. Probably, all it takes 2 minutes.
Yeah, nothing at all. And we'll have all the links in the show notes for this Conundrums episode on YouTube, on Blip, on our website. Just please click that link and go in and sign. And let's see if we can push this initiative to over 25,000 signatures. How about that?
If it gets 24,999, will be deleted as of midnight, March 24th. That's the way it works.
So you have to get at least 25,000 and hopefully
get 25K, or it's gone.
Okay. Well, Stephen, thank you so much for being my guest. We're going to put all those links out there, and of course, you can find Stephen on Facebook if you want to talk with him directly. There's email links on his website, and be sure you go by and sign up for that disclosure petition number 2, the Rockefeller Initiative. Stephen, thank you so much for being my guest, and we hope to have you on the show again.
You're welcome.
Good night, and we'll see you next time on Conundrums.